Welcome back to part 2 of volume 6. If you want part 1, links are in the description. Our story starts in the library. Ayanokoji was forced to come to a study session because Horikita kept bothering him. Understandably, he was annoyed, but he had a bigger problem. And that problem was staring right at him like he was a piece of delicious meat. It was Sato. She came here saying she needed help, but realistically, she was here to hardcore flirt with our boy. She asked him question after question like, do you come to the library often? And Ayanokoji just answered them while trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Listen, we all know our boy's a gangster. He pulls off miracle after miracle, putting the team on his back. But when it comes to romance, this man was lost. And if the constant attention didn't get to him, the distance did. In the library, you have to speak real close. He could practically feel Sato's breath on him. Now that's kinda hot. Ayanokoji contemplated abandoning Horikita's request and just going home. But then he asked himself, why am I here at this school? He came here for experiences like this to live a normal life. Flirting, love, some good old-fashioned skin-on-skin contact, that's all part of it. Horikita came out of nowhere to get the study session going. Ayanokoji used this opportunity to ask Horikita what's she doing about Kushida. Kushida was the traitor and Horikita needed countermeasures. But Horikita just brushed it off, saying she's dealing with it. Not promising. Today they had a joint study session with Class B. Ichinose entered the scene and said hello to everyone. But attention back to Sato, she was relentless. She tidied up the seat next door and told Ayanokoji to come sit, and so he did. As if the closeness and constant flirtation was enough, now they had everyone's attention, which Ayanokoji is pretty allergic to. Sato asked Ayanokoji how she could prepare for the exam. Our boy's like, my grades suck, ask Horikita. Oh, but Horikita was enjoying this too much. She was like, since they're partners, they should help each other out. Ayanokoji made excuse after excuse, clearly a cry for help. And finally, someone heard his plea. Ichinose offered to tutor them both. But nah, not even Little Miss Power of Friendship could stop Sato's rampage. Sato inched closer and closer, now uncomfortably close to our boy. Dude, she knew what she was doing. Her shirt was unbuttoned just enough for Ayanokoji to have a great view of all the goods. She started complimenting him non-stop. Oh, Ayanokoji, you're so mature and gentle. Were you always like this? Our boy tried to deflect her advances, but whenever he'd give her a boring answer, she'd just put a positive spin on it. Here's an example. Ayanokoji goes, oh, I'm gloomy. Sato, you're not gloomy, you're cool. I don't think cool applies to me. Well, I think you're cool. The only way to escape was to actually talk about studying. Unsurprisingly, Sato's grades were pretty yikes. Ayanokoji wondered how she wasn't expelled yet. Ultimately, the tutoring with Ichinose went well and Ayanokoji was able to make it out of there alive. After the session, Horikita asked Ichinose for advice and Ayanokoji was invited to watch. Now, the questions here may seem a bit random, but it makes sense when you realize it's about Kushida. Horikita wanted advice without exposing their traitor situation. First question, if a friend was in trouble, would Ichinose help? And obviously the answer was yes. Have you met her? So Horikita delved deeper. Who fit into the friend category? Would she help anyone in Class B even if they contributed nothing? And Ichinose stuck to her answer, she would help anyone. Now we get into the meat of things. What if that person hated her? How would she handle that? Ichinose answered logically, she would do her best to avoid that person. Horikita probed further, what if that person was in trouble? Would she still help? True to her reputation, Ichinose did not stutter. She would still help. She was devoted to everyone in Class B. This conversation sparked Ayanokoji's interest, so he asked his own question. Were people in other classes also her friends? Ichinose said that depends. She certainly thought Ayanokoji and Horikita were her friends, so would she help them in the same way? What if they came begging for 1,000,000 points? Ichinose said if the situation made sense, the details didn't matter. She would still help. Hell, even if it was Ryuuen, Ichinose would do what's possible. Note, the 1,000,000 points Ayanokoji mentioned is a bit cheeky because Ayanokoji peeked at Ichinose's phone and knew she had 1,000,000 points back in volume 4. Horikita asked her final question, what if two friends were in trouble and Ichinose could only save one? Ichinose was at a loss. In that situation, no matter who she helps, she'll end up hurting someone. The answer took Horikita by surprise. Ichinose might be the first good person she's met at the school, but when she expressed that, it made Ichinose very uncomfortable. She couldn't accept the praise. It was enough to physically shake her. Ichinose excused herself, and Horikita's business was also done, so the both of them left. Ayanokoji asked, what was all of that about? Horikita's been thinking a lot. What would Kushida's life look like if Horikita wasn't here? Kushida would be free, living her best life. But because of Horikita, she was forced to betray Class D and work together with Ryuuen. Again, we're seeing steady growth in Horikita's character. She's now able to see things through other people's perspective. Ayanokoji had a suggestion. Horikita and Kushida should get someone to mediate. Maybe someone like Ichinose, because right now they can't even have a conversation. Horikita's like, nah, she was gonna handle this on her own, and the time for that would be soon. Outside the library, Kushida ambushed them. She asked what they said to Ichinose. Horikita didn't sugarcoat. She admitted to getting advice concerning Kushida. Kushida wanted to talk without Ayanokoji here, so our boy had to leave. But on the way back, he got a call call from Horikita. The phone was in her pocket. She was letting Ayanokoji listen in. Kushida and Horikita went back and forth confirming what we know. Horikita wanted to work together. Kushida wanted Horikita out. They were at a standstill until Horikita mentioned a bet. The wager would be on the upcoming finals, and the terms were in Kushida's favor. Kushida could choose any subject she likes. If she scores better than Horikita, Horikita drops out of the school. If Horikita scores better, Kushida stops getting in her way. Ayanokoji couldn't believe it. This was risky. Still, Kushida was skeptical. What's to stop Horikita from not following through if she loses? Don't worry, Horikita had a secret weapon, kind of like Ayanokoji's mediator idea, but on another level. From the shadows emerged the former student council president, Manabu. Kushida was familiar with him. Horikita convinced her brother to oversee this bet. This is getting good. Manabu agreed to be witness and to carry out the results. Manabu still held tremendous power, so his word carried weight. With this reassurance, Kushida agreed to the bet. The subject would be math. However, Kushida called out to Ayanokoji. She knew Horikita told him about her past. She also knew right now he was listening in. Kushida called Horikita's phone several times throughout the conversation. It did not go through. I'd say Horikita was sloppy here. Kushida already knew this trick because Horikita pulled the same thing during the festival trying to record Ryuuen. Kushida urged Ayanokoji to come on over, so he did. Once Ayanokoji arrived, Kushida wanted to add another condition. If she wins, Ayanokoji also drops out. Horikita was like, no way, this is between you and me. But to Horikita's utter horror, Ayanokoji said he was in, but he had his own condition. He wanted the exact details of Kushida's past. I cannot stress how much Horikita hated this situation. But for our boy, it was a golden opportunity to figure out what happened, and the risk was worth it. The die was cast, Kushida was in, and she told him everything. The monologue at the beginning of the volume best explains Kushida's past. Before junior high, Kushida had everything. For lack of a better word, she was spoiled. Looks, intelligence, athletics, no one matched her. Everyone showered her with adoration. And she was addicted to the validation, addicted to being better than everyone. But the reverse held true. She hated losing more than anything. Sucks to be her, because once she entered junior high, it all changed. There were people smarter than her, stronger, faster. She was a jack of all trades, but master of none. And she would take L after L. That feeling of being special, being better than everyone, gone. She was starved for that attention. So she picked an area where she could excel, where no one could touch her, which was being kind to everyone by faking it. Quick side note, at this point, Ayanokoji was thinking, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's better to be a flawed, honest person than someone who's always faking it. But Kushida did it just like in Class D. She faked being nice to everyone. To the guys who no one wanted to talk to the girls who were uglier than sin. And for the time it worked, she gained their trust and access to secrets no one else had. However, as you can imagine, keeping up the act wasn't easy, especially for a terrible person like her. Kushida endured day after day to get that hit of validation. But the stress was too much, enough to make her pull out her hair and vomit. She needed an outlet badly. So she turned to the internet. She had a blog. She let out all the secrets she was holding in. She vented her heart out. And for the time, it worked. She even got encouragement from strangers. However, surprise Pikachu face, someone found her blog and they spread whatever she wrote all over class. Oh, that's weird. Not like anyone ever gets exposed on the internet. This was doomsday for Kushida. She spent all her time becoming the most popular kid in class, and within seconds, everyone turned on her. They knew how badly she thought of them, how in secret she made fun of them. Kushida was bullied and exiled. To turn things around, Kushida used the only weapon she had. Remember, back in part 1, Ayanokoji and Horikita thought it could be one of two things, lies or violence. And like I said, it was close. It was the other side of the coin. Kushida used the truth. She simply let out all her secrets, everything she had. Who hated who had a crush on who. Her classmates turned on each other and it was game over. However, Kushida technically didn't do anything wrong, so the school couldn't punish her. And just like then, Kushida had dirt on students in Class D, enough to destroy a few people. That was her threat. Interesting thing to note, Kushida swapped from venting on the internet to screaming out into the void in real life. You know, like a totally well-adjusted human being. That explains that iconic scene back in volume 1, where Ayanokoji caught Kushida yelling out nasty things and got to second base all in one go. Kushida confirmed the terms of their bet. If she wins, Horikita is out. And with that, she left. Horikita and Ayanokoji understood there was danger here. There's a chance Kushida would go to Ryuuen for help. If she gets a hold of the math questions and answers, it's lights out. But on the other hand, Ryuuen is totally into tormenting Horikita, so it's reasonable to think he wouldn't want her gone. And knowing Ryuuen, he'll easily see through Kushida. Regardless, Ayanokoji had a few ideas of his own. We fast forward to the 5th study session session with Ayanokoji, Yukimura, Miyaki, and Haruka. This time the questions Yukimura prepared were brutal. Haruka and Miyaki complained, but their fates were sealed. Ayanokoji was impressed with how great of a teacher Yukimura was. But that admiration didn't last long because Yukimura handed our boy his own set of questions. He was partnered with Sato. He needed to prepare. Ayanokoji tried to back out, but that's not happening. Haruka lowered her head and pulled Ayanokoji into the abyss of studying. Like a vengeful spirit. After some gruesome problem solving, the gang took a break. Haruka again was gossiping about romance, but when she went to grab some coffee, she dropped her cup and it rolled to someone's feet, and that person crushed the cup. It was Ryuuen. Miyaki slowly stood up and told Ryuuen to cut the crap. If you read Miyaki's student info, he's been in some fights, so he's not afraid to throw down. Ishizaki, one of Ryuen's henchmen, grabbed Miyaki's collar, but Miyaki didn't back down. He told Ishizaki that goons should stay out of this. Yo, I like this guy. Right now, Ryuuen was after Yukimura and Ayanokoji. Ryuuen asked if they got his little message, and by that, I'm pretty sure it's a message at the end of part 1 where he asked, "What are you?" Yukimura was confused and Ayanokoji just dismissed it. By the way, this is one of Ryuen's favorite tricks. He loves to taunt people to gather their reactions and that way get information. A recent example is when he found Class C's traitor. He put on a show to gather reactions and then pinpoint who the traitor was. There are other examples like when he crashed Horikita and Ayanokoji's meeting in Volume 4. Also when he taunted Hirata during the sports festival. And Ayanokoji knew this, so he was careful not to give Ryuuen anything. The fact that Ryuuen was after Yukimura also let Ayanokoji know that Ryuuen cracked Manabe. However, things got even more interesting. Ryuuen brought with him a new face. The girl had silver hair and was a bit odd. Her name was Hiyori. He asked Hiyori if she caught something, but nothing yet. And right here, Hiyori let slip another piece of key information. Ryuuen had 4 candidates for who the mastermind was: Ayanokoji, Yukimura, Hirata, and Koenji. Miyaki at this point had enough and told Ryuuen to buzz off. Ryuen's like, sure, but he'll be back. Everyone left except Hiyori, who was staring at them menacingly. Just kidding, she's cute as a button. Haruka was in a bad mood and asked what she wanted, but Hiyori claimed that she came in peace. And to show that, she got Haruka a new cup of coffee. And when Haruka drank it, she was amazed. It had the same amount of sugar as her original drink. Hiyori claimed to have superhuman perception. She figured out how much sugar Haruka liked by noticing how much leftover sugar there was in the cup Ryuuen crushed. She also claimed to keep her distance from Ryuuen. She only accompanied him because she was interested in the mastermind within Class D. The gang was confused. The only mastermind they knew was Horikita, but Hiyori corrected them saying it's not her. Either way, Yukimura was mad. They needed to study. Hiyori picked up on this, apologized, and left. Ayanokoji wasn't sure what this girl wanted, but he would still investigate her. Oh yes, investigate the waifu candidate. Very good. They left the library, and at this point, the group didn't feel like just a study group. They talked about everything. The conversation was going well until Haruka asked Yukimura why he came to this school. He got really angry. Yukimura was defensive about his past, and you'll see why in a bit. To make amends, Haruka told Yukimura why she came here, which wasn't really out of the norm. Good job / college. Miyaki shared as well. He came for the free boarding and education. However, Yukimura brought up the fact that if they don't manage to get to Class A, they won't get the perks upon graduation. There was evidence of this. The upper year Class Ds looked miserable. They decided to head over to the convenience store and grab Ayanokoji's second favorite dessert, ice cream. You know, right next to his favorite, thighs. Ayanokoji decided to get some advice. He asked Haruka if she knew anything about Sato. Yeah, she did not. They all suggested he should ask Kushida. Yeah, okay. But this opened a whole other can of worms, as Haruka suggested Ayanokoji had a crush on Sato. Ayanokoji did his best to shake off the sentiment, and Yukimura tried to help him, but once Haruka has a whiff of romance, she's not backing down. But being serious for a second, Haruka commented how nicely their friendship is coming along. Haruka also had this adorable habit of giving everyone a nickname. Listen, I really don't want to pronounce any of these, but I will since I love you all. So Yukimura became Yukimu, Miyaki became Miyachi, and Ayanokoji became Ayanon? Yeah, one of those is not like the others. But these nicknames were Haruka's way of closing the gap between them as friends. Miyaki also agreed he liked this group. Yukimura was iffy at first in a tsundere kind of way, but ultimately was down. And for Ayanokoji, who just lost the idiot trio, this was a welcome change. So their friend group was born and was officially dubbed the Ayanokoji group, much to Ayanokoji's dislike. And Haruka put in a rule to this group. Everyone inside the group had to use each other's first names. Yukimura, however, did not want to use his first name, and this goes back to why he hates his past. His mom gave him his first name and he despises her. She abandoned their family when he was young. Man, what is with moms in the Classroom of the Elite series? First Sudo and now him? Either way, Yukimura wanted them to use the first name his dad gave him. But there was still one important step left. Ayanokoji still needed a nickname, and a nickname Haruka would give him. One so iconic, it'll be forever etched into the pages of history. His nickname would be Kiyopon. Kiyopon. I'm like 99% sure I said that wrong, but I'm not even sure if there's a way to say it right. If you know, just leave a comment down below telling me how. And yeah, none of the dudes were using that nickname. Well, before they could leave, another person crashed the party. Someone who's been diabolically watching them from the beginning. It was Sakura, and she was sweating like crazy, and she crashed into a nearby trash can with all the grace of a drunk chimpanzee. But she pulled herself together, yelling out that she wanted to join the Ayanokoji group. I mean, the dudes were on board, she's harmless. However, Haruka wasn't sold. She would only let Sakura join the group if she could use everyone's first name. Sakura somehow mustered the courage for Yukimura, Miyake, and Haruka, but when it came to Ayanokoji's first name, which is Kiyotaka by the way, it was rough. At one point she blurted out Kyopio, which is something, but ultimately she managed and was invited into the group. To be honest, this volume was a lot of firsts for our boy. He got his first confession, his first real friend group. His quality of life instantly went up. They created a group chat to stay in contact, and they also made plans to go to the movies. Ayanokoji was delighted, so this is what having real friends was like. Before Ayanokoji could go to sleep, he got a call from Horikita. She wanted to set a time for the final meeting before Paper Shuffle. And even she realized Ayanokoji had gotten really close to his new group. But to be fair, Horikita was also making strides. She was now able to coordinate Hirata and Kei without Ayanokoji's help, but she still wanted his input for the final meeting. After Horikita's call, Ayanokoji got another text. It was from Kei. Guess Pimp Koji is popular tonight. Kei reported on what Ayanokoji wanted her to do, which was to investigate Hiyori. Turns out the girl wasn't super perceptive, it was just a trick. Hiyori asked around to figure out how much sugar Haruka liked. But what was even the point? Well, again, remember, they're trying to figure out who X is. And Hiyori, as mentioned, was personally interested in the mastermind. So it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that Hiyori pretended to be super perceptive in order to make them nervous. If one of them was X, they might break and give Hiyori a clue or two. But unfortunately, Ayanokoji hasn't shown a facial reaction since volume 1, so yeah, that didn't work. Ayanokoji informed Kei about the meeting, and they talked about the topic of movies, and from there, Kei also found out about Ayanokoji's new group. But fun time was over. Ayanokoji had another job for Kei. He sent over the details, and Kei was super annoyed. This would be tough, but Ayanokoji assured her it would be necessary for both of them. After hanging up, Ayanokoji received a text. It was from Kei. She sent him a cute sticker of a shortcake with a message that said happy belated birthday. Damn, that's cute as hell. Ayanokoji realized she creeped his profile to find his birthday, so he creeped her back. Her birthday was on March 8th. He'd remember that. Unfortunately, he had to delete the text and sticker because he couldn't afford any evidence on his phone. The next day, they went to the movies, and we get to see this event from Sakura's point of view. For her, the last few days were a roller coaster. First, she witnessed the guy she liked being pulled away by a gal. Next thing she knew, she was on her way to watch the movies with him. She even got to call him by his first name. It was enough to make her giggle, and she even said his name by mistake. Ayanokoji's like, "What's up?" and she just shrank back. Nothing could rain on our parade. Nothing but the calamity that is Sato. They ran into Sato in the movie theaters, and Sato made a beeline for Ayanokoji's arm, grabbing it immediately. Her chest made direct contact with our young hero, and Sakura was like, huh? Ayanokoji told Sato to knock it off, but she hung onto his arm like a koala. Ayanokoji noticed that Sato was trying really hard. By the way, Kei was also there, and she greeted Ayanokoji's group in the most condescending manner. If you don't remember, Kei's relationship with Ayanokoji's group is pretty yikes. She bullied Sakura during the island exam, and got into an argument with Yukimura over toilets. The second Yukimura saw Kei, he just dipped inside the movie theater, and Ayanokoji followed suit, shaking off Sato. When they're seated, Sakura asked Ayanokoji a bunch of questions, but really it all boiled down to figuring out whether or not Ayanokoji and Sato were dating. She even let slip the fact that she was watching when Ayanokoji was called out by Sato. Dude, if she watched what happened in the library, her little heart would just explode. Ayanokoji assured her that they weren't dating, and next time when Sato clings to him like that, he'll shake her off. Ayanokoji was Sakura's first love, and she wouldn't give up. She told Ayanokoji that she'd be watching. Great, more meddling in his love life, just what the doctor ordered. But this is some good character development for Sakura. In the past, she wouldn't be able to ask questions like this. A few days after the movie, they had their final meeting for Paper Shuffle. They held the meeting within a karaoke room. It had the usual suspects, like Kei, Hirata, Kushida, Suro, Yukimura, and of course our boy Ayanokoji. And the one leading it was Horikita. So far, the study groups did great, and Miyake and Haruka's problem was solved. Kushida also said she was glad everyone was safe. But out of nowhere, Kei started arguing with Kushida. Kei accused Kushida of paying lip service to everyone. Kei was annoyed that Kushida was still taking it easy while others might be in danger. The entire room was shocked. This might be a bit much. Hirata tried to de-escalate, but Kei went all in, asking Kushida if she was making fun of Kei in her head for being stupid. Kushida denied it, but Kei wasn't backing off. And at this point, even Horikita was like, yo, what's going on? This went on until we hit the point of no return. Kei took her drink and poured it all over Kushida's head. Alright, that was it. Hirata grabbed Kei's arm, while Kushida still put up the goody two-shoes act saying they shouldn't blame Kei. On the other hand, Kei refused to say sorry and looked to other people for support, but no one could back her. Even when she turned to Ayanokoji, he was like, nope, you're in the wrong. Now that's gotta hurt. Kei ultimately apologized. There was a problem though. Kushida's blazer was soaked. Horikita asked if Kushida had an extra blazer for the exam. She confessed she did not. The other one was damaged. Well, that's not technically true. As we know back from volume 1, Kushida is still holding on to it. It's her leverage against Ayanokoji. Sudo mentioned the dry cleaners and Kei offered to pay to make amends, so Kushida accepted. The meeting ended and Ayanokoji headed back to his dorm. But on the way there, he met Katsuragi. Dude was troubled. They talked about a few things like the student council, and Katsuragi regrets not being able to get in. He just couldn't get Manabu's approval. Once they arrived to the dorms, there was a huge crowd. Something was up, and when Ayanokoji checked his mailbox, it became apparent. There was a letter inside. It said Ichinose was illegally collecting points and it was signed by Ryuuen. Katsuragi mentioned how reckless this was. If Ryuen's claims are wrong, he can be punished. But he could also see Ryuuen totally doing this to plant the seeds of doubt, so people think there's a chance Ichinose did this. And speak of the devil, Ryuuen arrived on the scene. A Class B student rushed him asking what's the big idea. Ryuuen acted like he had no idea, but once he saw the letter, he was like, okay, show proof that Ichinose isn't illegally collecting points. But the dude wouldn't have to defend Ichinose because soon she showed up. She declared she would report to the school tomorrow to clear up this misunderstanding. Ryuuen was like, why not fix it now? Just show everyone how many points you have and how you got them. Ichinose knew that regardless of whatever she showed Ryuuen, he wouldn't trust her. And she can't show her cards to him just like that. Unfortunately for Ryuuen, Ichinose reported to the school the next day and her reputation was clear. Important thing to note, Ryuuen was not punished for sending out that rumor. It was a few days before the finals, and we see Arisu taking a nap in a deserted place. Well, that isn't entirely true. She was dreaming of the boy who went toe-to-toe with Manabu. She played the events over and over in her head. There was no debate. Ayanokoji should have won. She obsessed over him like a maiden in love. It doesn't matter what class he was in, as long as he was in the school and she could fight him. He was the only remedy to her perpetual boredom. In the middle of this dream, Arisu was approached by a girl from class A, Masumi. Masumi was not in a good mood, annoyed at being called out. It's important to note Masumi is one of Arisu's lackeys. She does her dirty work. For example, calling out Ayanokoji after the sports festival. Arisu asked Masumi about the state of class A. A few students are mad that they had to fight class B. They preferred an easier opponent like class C or D. Even Masumi was of that opinion. Arisu knew the risk here. Class A's ego was fragile. Their entire worth was tied to being class A. Take that away from them and everything would crumble. And since their points are so close to class B's, that's a real possibility. Remember back in volume 5 when Hirata said Arisu was aggressive? Attacking class B instead of C or D is a great example of that. However, losing points wasn't Arisu's concern. She wanted entertainment and this was part of it. Masumi insisted maybe it's time to work with Katsuragi. Arisu had clearly won the faction wars. This is evident by how troubled Katsuragi was throughout the volume. However, little did Masumi know her dream would come true. Arisu had a meeting set up with Katsuragi and he arrived. Before the meeting started, Arisu asked Katsuragi a question. Was her decision to attack class B wrong? Katsuragi was like, yeah, she was wrong. He would have attacked C or D. Arisu understood who Katsuragi was as a person. Always dull, always boring, always playing it safe. She sympathized. She was the same way 10 years ago, but she's long abandoned that mindset. However, attacking class B wasn't about being safe. It was about making the right play. Arisu wasn't interested in boring individuals like Katsuragi. In the past, Ryuuen was the only one who showed promise, but now that she knows who Ayanokoji is, no one else matters. As long as Arisu can defeat him, she was ready to throw away even class A's future. Regardless, Katsuragi yielded. He would no longer fight for leadership. However, Arisu offered a proposal. Katsuragi would manage class A under her orders. Katsuragi refused right away. Being Arisu's lackey didn't interest him. And with that, Katsuragi left and Masumi asked if that was okay. Arisu's like, yeah, she only messed with Katsuragi to kill time. However, Arisu had another mission for Masumi, to spy on Ayanokoji. Masumi asked why, and Arisu explained he's her entertainment just like Masumi. This made Masumi mad and she grabbed Arisu by the collar. You could tell she was disgusted by everything Arisu stood for. Arisu took her cane and lightly jabbed at Masumi's throat, asking if Masumi really wanted to do this. Arisu had access to her weakness and at any moment could end her. So here we see the real relationship between them. Arisu had Masumi in the palm of her hands. As Masumi walked back, Arisu watched her, admiring how cute she was. Damn, this lolly is psycho. I kinda like it like that. Regardless, at the school, the only entertainment for her left was Ayanokoji. We cut back to class D and they were hard at work. Only 3 days till the exams. Ayanokoji speculated that Ryuuen had a plan in place because you didn't see class C studying anywhere. However, Horikita and Ayanokoji had an important mission. Horikita held in her hands the key to class D's victory, the exam questions. But Ayanokoji was worried, how would they keep the questions safe? Hopefully Horikita had a plan. On their way to submit the questions, they ran into the worst person possible. example. Ryuuen. He was also submitting questions last second. Horikita mocked Ryuuen, saying, isn't he worried about someone in Class C betraying him? This is an obvious jab because during the sports festival, Horikita was saved because somebody betrayed Ryuuen. But the mad lad brushed it off, saying no one would be stupid enough to betray him. Now, this is pretty interesting. Why would Ryuuen say that? Because obviously Horikita knows someone betrayed Ryuuen before. I'm thinking it goes back to what I said before about Ryuuen. Ryuuen relies on people's reactions to piece together information. Remember, Ayanokoji is still a suspect for being X, and X would obviously know Ryuuen was betrayed before because he orchestrated the betrayal. Or maybe he's trying to tell X that, hey, listen, I found your little spy and I made an example of them, so no one will be stupid enough to betray me again. Either of those things would elicit a reaction from X. But nah, you know our boy's stone cold. Ayanokoji carried on the conversation like nothing happened. They soon arrived to the staff room and called out their respective teachers. As Horikita talked to Sai, Ryuuen had a sinister look on his face. Something was up. No matter, our girl had a plan. Before handing in the questions, Horikita had a condition. Regardless of what happened, Sai wasn't allowed to show these questions to anyone without Horikita's permission. Sai said that was tricky. She would need to know everyone in Class D agreed to these questions, but ultimately accepted Horikita's request. She would only show someone these questions if Horikita was present. Now, Horikita could rest easy. But something wasn't right. Ryuuen still had a stupid smirk on his face. Right then, Ayanokoji had a grave realization. He looked into Sai's eyes and she confirmed it. Unfortunately, he couldn't say anything because Ryuuen was there, but he hoped to God Horikita would notice. And just before Horikita was about to walk out that door, she turned back and asked Sai the million-dollar question. Will the school accept these questions? Sai said they'll need to review before they do. Horikita was more direct. She asked if the school already accepted other questions. Sai confirmed it. The school had already accepted and reviewed the questions for Class D. And just like that, everything came crashing down. Horikita asked to have the previous questions cancelled, but Sai could not oblige. The culprit told Sai to pretend to accept new questions but not to use them. Horikita asked who that was, but the answer was obvious. It was Kushida. And to make matters worse, they would need Kushida present to change the questions. And the deadline was up in 2 hours. That probably wasn't even possible. Ayanokoji speculated Kushida was hiding in her room or somewhere else. She would not be found before the deadline. And they couldn't even cry foul play. Horikita told Sai to show her the questions, and they were really well made. Ayanokoji was sure Kaneda from Class C helped her make those questions. Horikita looked defeated while Ryuuen was laughing like a maniac. Horikita snapped and told Ryuuen to get lost, and so he did. Once Ryuuen left, Sai told Horikita it's okay. What's this? Horikita replied back that she wanted to keep up the acting a little bit more, just to be safe. But things were now over. Ayanokoji understood right then what was going on. Little Horikita's all grown up. She saw all of this coming. This was her countermeasure. Remember how Horikita kept telling Ayanokoji she's dealing with the Kushida situation? It was to keep him in the dark so both of them could act flawlessly. She explained as soon as paper shuffle was announced, Horikita approached Sai. Horikita gave her 2 conditions. First, no one but Horikita could submit the final questions. 2, if a student does submit questions, Sai should pretend to accept them. The same condition Kushida had. So, they wouldn't be using Kushida's questions. Ryuuen was relying on that strategy. So if anyone in Class C was unfortunate enough not to study, they would get expelled. Ryuuen had no idea how much damage Horikita was about to do. Ayanokoji was impressed. He admitted he couldn't even come up with a beautiful countermeasure like that. Still, Sai was worried. In her years of teaching, she's never had to do anything like this. Even with Class A's faction war, they'd never have to go this far. But Horikita assured her she'll settle everything after this exam. The only thing left was to beat Kushida's score. We fast forward to the day of the exam. Math was on the first day, so they'd know the results of the bet soon. Sato greeted Ayanokoji. She was nervous, but before they could converse, Kei showed up and snatched Sato away. Ayanokoji's like, what? Hirata explained that Kei's been eyeing Ayanokoji a lot. She's surprisingly jealous. Also, speculation here, Kei likely showed up to the movies for the same purpose, to keep an eye on Ayanokoji. Hirata also mentioned Hiyori. She dropped by his study session. She also told him about the mastermind. Hirata knew right away it was Ayanokoji. Our boy didn't deny it. There was no point. Hirata said he'd support Ayanokoji if Ryuuen came after him. Horikita showed up determined. She put her heart and soul into studying. Even if Kushida had the answer, she was prepared to score 100. The exam started and Ayanokoji scanned the room. He remembered that Sato was excited during the study sessions, so she'd likely score well. That's why Ayanokoji would score a 60 as a baseline. That should cover them. But the real show began when it was time for math. Kushida turned over the exam and let out an audible why. Ayanokoji knew then and there that Ryuuen had made his choice. All his troubles were over. After the exam, Ayanokoji and Horikita confronted Kushida. They didn't need to wait for the results. They could estimate their scores. Horikita estimated a 98. Kushida admitted defeat. She didn't even score a 80. Kushida would honor the bet. Looks like Ryuuen screwed her over. Kushida wasn't doing so hot either. She looked shaky and exhausted. Horikita extended her hand, proposing to work together. However, Kushida hated her and was starting to hate her more. She left Horikita hanging. Ayanokoji realized now Kushida's Kushida's focus might be on him. He didn't think this through, and when it rains, it pours. Right then, Ayanokoji received another text from Ryuuen. "What are you planning?" it said, followed up with "I'll make you pay." Then Ryuuen sent him a picture. It spoke 1,000 words. Ryuuen would likely go after the person in that picture. Ryuuen was obsessed, and Ayanokoji was tired of it. If Ryuuen wanted to pick a fight, he'd return the favor. If he wanted to play that badly, then let's play. On the other hand, Kushida was furious. She confronted Ryuuen. Her blood was boiling, her eyes were red. Losing was one thing, but losing to Horikita was the ultimate embarrassment. But Ryuuen didn't care at all. He actually found it funny. Kushida asked why Ryuuen betrayed her. She gave him everything and she got nothing. Important to note, the plan to strike first and submit the questions was Ryuen's idea. However, Ryuuen corrected her. She failed. Horikita beat her to it and got her questions accepted first. So he's free to not keep up his end of the bargain. Kushida couldn't believe it. During the sports festival, she had the last laugh. But now the tables were turned. Ryuuen was like, "You should be thanking me." Kushida was confused. Why should she be thanking him? Then Ryuuen got up and forcefully grabbed Kushida. He unbuttoned her blazer and casually reached inside. Kushida was like, "What the hell?" and backed off instinctively. "Girl, relax. Ryuuen has standards." He told her to look inside her pockets and she did. She found a piece of paper. It had the answers to the exam, but not the exam they just took. It was answers to the original exam that Ryuuen was supposed to use. Ryuuen explained someone planted that on her, probably during gym class. Ryuuen speculated there's more evidence of cheating scattered throughout her stuff. Someone in class D was about to get her expelled. That's why she should thank Ryuuen. If he kept the questions the same, it was game over. Kushida was shocked. How the hell did this happen? Kushida thought back to all the ways someone could plant this on her. But the only thing that stood out, when a girl poured juice all over her. Ryuuen asked if that girl was Kay, and Kushida was like, "How did you know?" Ryuuen demanded Kushida tell him everything, and so she did. Now it was clear this was a trap. Kushida was like, "No way." She checked her uniform after she got it back. Ryuuen clarified the spilling the juice wasn't to plant something on her. It was to figure out whether or not she had a spare uniform. Because if she didn't, it's simple to frame her like this. Kushida's mind was blown. She wouldn't accept this. There's no way everyone in that room would work together to set her up. Kushida is observant and she would have seen right through it. Ryuuen corrected her again. They weren't working together. Spilling the juice was just the trigger. Someone predicted how everyone would react after and played them like a fiddle. That was a wild theory, but Kushida started thinking. Horikita asked if she had a spare blazer, but if Horikita didn't, Hirata would. And obviously Hirata would hold back Kei. Ryuuen mentioned the mastermind. The same mastermind that sent the letter accusing Ichinose of hoarding points. That's right, Ryuuen did not send that letter. Ayanokoji did, and it makes sense because he'd know about Ichinose's points. Kushida asked why didn't Ryuuen just deny the accusations, but then realized he wouldn't. That's just who Ryuuen is. A letter like that got him excited. And if there's a chance Ichinose is hoarding points, he'd want to know more. By the way, there's two reasons why Ayanokoji sent that letter. First, it was to see how the school treats rumors, and he got what he wanted. He sent out that rumor and Ryuuen wasn't punished. This will be important for later on. And also, he wanted to get Ryuuen more invested in chasing X. We'll see why that matters in just a bit. However, Ryuuen made it clear Kushida's attempts to expel Horikita was not appreciated. Kushida bit back, taunting Ryuuen, saying how does it feel to be beaten by the defective class? That's right, Class D would likely win paper shuffle. But Ryuuen didn't have a care in the world. His plans were coming along nicely. Ryuuen was about to leave, but then Kushida had a grave realization. How the hell did X get the answers and questions to the exam? Simple. Ryuuen gave it to him. It was necessary. A while back, X sent Ryuuen a text. The subject line read transaction. He told Ryuuen to give him the questions and answers Class C would use, or give Kushida the wrong questions. But why would Ryuuen comply? Well, normally he wouldn't. But before that, X gave Ryuuen a freebie. He warned Ryuuen about Horikita's plan. He told Ryuuen that Horikita had her questions approved before Kushida. That way Ryuuen was able to make last-second adjustments, so Class C didn't face major expulsions. So given the situation, Ryuuen had three choices. First choice, ignore X. Just because he gave him free info doesn't mean Ryuuen has to reciprocate. This meant giving the right questions to Kushida and carrying out the deal as intended. But remember, Ryuuen doesn't want Horikita out, and he knew about Kushida's bet. We're not shown how he figured it out, but Kushida's not exactly subtle about her desire to expel Horikita. I mean, she yelled it out in front of Ryuuen back in Volume 5. Given that and the fact that X specifically told Ryuuen to change Kushida's questions, and that X is close to Horikita, it's easy to assume that's how Ryuuen figured out that there might be a deal between them. Now that brings us to the second choice, which is to leave the questions as they were. But this gave X exactly what he wanted, and that's no fun for Ryuuen. And why would that give X everything? Again, we know Ryuuen figured out that Kushida would be framed even before the final happened. We understand that from the scene where he reached inside her blazer. He was already sure evidence had been planted on her. And again, back to deduction, it's not weird to think X would want to get rid of a traitor within Class D. So if Ryuuen gave X the test questions and kept the questions as is, first Class D would beat Class C without a doubt because they have the test questions. And X would also have the ammo to expel Kushida. It was legit the dream scenario for X. And that brings us to the third and final option, which is to give Kushida the wrong questions by changing up the current question. Remember, Ryuuen handed in questions alongside Horikita. Why? Yep, that's right. It was to change up the question so X couldn't frame Kushida and Horikita didn't get expelled. To Ryuuen, this was the ideal scenario. Also, fascinating thing here, Horikita was strictly against Ayanokoji expelling Kushida. So our boy found a loophole by putting the choice in Ryuen's hands. Now I know all of this is a lot to take in, but hold on to that. Rewatch it if you have to, because I'm about to blow your freaking mind. There's a hidden plot here, and it changes everything we know. A lot of what happened relies on that transaction. But when did it exactly happen? You're thinking on the last day, right? When Horikita pulled off her epic move. In the novel, it seemed like that's when Ayanokoji found out about her move, and then he supplied that information to Ryuuen to barter that transaction. Well, that doesn't fit the timeline. Like I said, on the same day Ryuuen was there changing out his questions. Why would Ryuuen need to change his questions if the transaction hadn't happened? He only had the three choices after the transaction. Into the rabbit hole we go. And before I dive deep, just a disclaimer, this is speculation territory. But first, let's talk about Ayanokoji as a narrator. He's what they call an unreliable narrator. What does that mean? Well, best case, he'll hide the truth. Worst case, he'll straight up lie to you. I'm not gonna give you too many examples because it might spoil things, but this lying becomes more apparent as the books go on. However, this volume is the biggest example yet. When Horikita pulled her big move to destroy Ryuen's plans, Ayanokoji specifically said, even I couldn't have come up with a countermeasure that good, which is straight up BS because he already knew Horikita would do that. Here's why. If the transaction happened on the last day and Ayanokoji gets the exam questions from Ryuuen on the last day, he still needs to plant the evidence on Kushida. But how would he do that? Kushida had no idea Horikita's questions were accepted first. She only learned it when she confronted Ryuuen. And on that specific day, she made herself unreachable so they couldn't swap out the questions. Also, pretty sure there's no gym class between then and the exams because that was 3 days before the exams. And even if there was, Kushida would skip to avoid confrontation. So Ayanokoji would have zero chance to plant evidence on her. Couple that with the fact of Ryuuen swapping the questions, the transaction would have to happen before Horikita pulled her move and revealed it to Ayanokoji. So Ayanokoji already knew what Horikita was gonna do. Also, by the way, remember Ayanokoji asked Kei a favor and she was like, this is gonna be really annoying? That favor was pouring juice on top of Kushida. Now, things get even better. If the transaction didn't happen on the last day, think about the entire interaction between Horikita, Ryuuen, and Ayanokoji in the teacher's lounge. While Horikita was thinking she was fooling Ryuuen because she had her questions accepted, Ryuuen already knew Horikita won. So why was Ryuuen laughing and taunting like he was victorious? Easy, it goes back to Ryuen's bread and butter, what I've been pointing out for the entire volume. Ryuuen uses reactions to get information and Ayanokoji is still a suspect. Ryuuen was putting on a show to see how Ayanokoji reacts because X already knows that Horikita won, so Ryuen's act would catch him off guard. So that entire scene was Horikita and Ryuuen putting on Oscar-worthy performances to make Ayanokoji crack, and he didn't even flinch. What a monster. And not to mention, he also had a backup plan. I think instead of relying on Kei, Ayanokoji himself went and put the cheats inside Kushida's clothes. Remember back in volume 4.5, Kei was really scared when Ayanokoji said he was gonna expel someone. Giving her a request like that might compromise his favorite tool, and it also lets him check Horikita and Sato's blazer for cheats. Remember, Kushida also had the questions and answers by framing Sato and getting Ayanokoji expelled, or framing Horikita and getting her expelled. Kushida had the chance to use those avenues for victory. And if you ever start to doubt how much of a savage Ayanokoji is, just remember, if he expelled Kushida, he also expelled Ike, her partner. And in the case Kushida had more than one blazer, he would eliminate her by eliminating Ike. I told you in my intro, the most 1 million IQ move I've ever seen in my life. And goddamn if this volume didn't deliver. But there's still more to the story, so let's get back to it. Ryuuen pulled out his phone and took a look at a picture. The same picture he sent Ayanokoji as a declaration of war. It was a picture of Kei. If X didn't reveal himself, he would destroy her. And while Ryuuen hatched his plan, Arisu was doing the same. We got the results of Paper Shuffle and it was as expected. Class D beat Class C and Class A beat Class B. Our scene starts with Class B throwing themselves a pity party. Even though they lost, it wasn't by a wide margin. Kanzaki and Ichinose talked about how Class D shouldn't be underestimated. For them to get this close to Class C in their first year was incredible. But this wasn't over yet. Ryuuen was planning something. Maybe he was sacrificing Class class points for something else. There was an elephant in the room. What about Class B's relationship with Class D? If they overtake Class C, B is their next target. Should they keep their alliance? For the moment, Ichinose said yes. She wanted to fight off Ryuuen and Arisu first. However, they can't take Class D lightly. Horikita is quite capable and she has Hirata and Kushida supporting her. Not to mention, Ayanokoji is a complete mystery and has talents as shown in the relay. Kanzaki excused himself because he needed to meet someone. Ichinose found this weird because Kanzaki is usually antisocial, but he said it was for the sake of Class B. On the way to the festivities, Ichinose ran into Arisu. They exchanged pleasantries, but Arisu brought up a proposition. She was troubled and wanted Ichinose's advice. This caught Ichinose by surprise. Arisu seemed like the type of person who could handle anything on her own. Regardless, Ichinose was up for it. They exchanged numbers and parted ways. Shibata, however, was wary. Arisu is trouble. But that didn't matter to Ichinose. She would help anyone, even if one day that would swallow her whole. That's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.